Welcome to the first surveying technology assignment for this semester. We're going to go ahead and get started for this assignment. Let's start by setting up some sort of folder structure that we're going to use to save these assignments as we go forward throughout the semester. You can do this however you like. I'm going to show you a simple structure that I am going to use and you'll see me use as we go through these videos. So I'm just going to save this on my desktop for my convenience as we do this, and I'm going to name this first folder land surveying. Once again, you can do this whatever you want. When I actually do my classes, keep everything in one big folder for school, so you might consider doing that. But inside my land surveying folder, I'm going to create another one called surveying technology assignments. Okay. Now, once I have that folder, since there's going to be multiple surveying technology assignments throughout the semester, I'm going to create one specifically for this assignment that we're going to do today, which is Introduction to Civil 3D and Topcon Link. Now, it's important, regardless of how you do your file structure and where you save your files, we're going to be building upon these assignments week after week, so you need to have them saved somewhere where they will be accessible and where they will not be lost. So if you don't save them somewhere where you can hold on to them, you're going to have to do the assignment again to catch up to where we were at. So now that we have this folder structure created, we can download the two files that we'll need for this assignment. We just need these two right here, this CONST340 Civil 3D template. You can see it's been updated as of January 4th, 2023. If this template updates, we'll continue posting it. And then this other one, this Upper Fields Total Station survey data, this is what came out of the total station. So I'm going to download both these and I'm going to save them. For me, right, I'm going to save to the desktop to my land surveying. For me, I'm going to use the Civil 3D template for all assignments throughout the semester. So I'm not necessarily going to put it in my surveying technology folder. So I'll just keep it in my land surveying folder and I'll save it there. But this Upper Fields, this survey data is most definitely for this assignment. So once again, I'm going to download it, and I'm just going to put it in my folder that I created for this assignment. Okay, that's it on downloading the files to get started for this and setting up. Okay, now that we have the folder structure set up and we have those files downloaded, we need to convert the data that we got from the total station when we did the survey into something that Civil 3D can actually use. So to do that, we're going to use Topcon Link. This software is particularly because the .raw file that we just downloaded is Topcon specific. Other file formats are interchangeable between different total station manufacturers, and Civil 3D can actually read some files directly from total stations, but in this case you cannot read the .raw. So first thing we're going to do once we have Topcon Link opened is we're going to come over here to this upper left hand corner and we'll hit this Open File button. Alternatively, if you don't see this button here, you can do File, Open File. We're going to navigate to where we've saved that file that we downloaded. In this case, I know that I have it here. So I'm looking for this introduction, here it is, for this Upper Fields Total Station survey data. Something important to note as we go throughout all these softwares is if you know that the file is in the folder that you've navigated to, in this case I know it is in this folder, but let's say for some reason I don't see the file, right? Like it shows the folder's empty. Make sure that the format name down here underneath the file name that you're looking for either shows all files or the particular file extension that you're looking for. That can save you a lot of headache because you could keep downloading it and downloading it and downloading it. But if it's not looking for either all files or that particular file extension, you won't find it. So I'm going to select this and I'll hit open. So you see here, this shows all of the different data that we took when I did the survey. So I don't have to do anything with this in here except export it into a file format. We're exporting particularly to .csv. So I'm going to go to File up in the upper left hand corner here, Save As. And it'll open this dialog box. It might take a second to load depending on your computer. And this dialog box will open and you want to navigate to where you want to save it to. I'm going to save it in the exact same folder that I have been keeping my other data. Sometimes this software is a bit older, so sometimes it's a little bit slower, which is unfortunate, but we can make it work. Okay, so once you have it to the folder where you want to save it, you need to name the file. In this case, I'm just going to name it BYU-I upper fields survey data. You can name it really whatever you want. It doesn't really matter at this point. Just make sure it's something you know what it is. Now the format name, this is important. If you click this drop down, most likely, since this is the first time you're going to open Topcon link for this video, most likely the format name will not be what we're using. So you hit this drop down and you'll need to find it. If it looks like this, right, it's going to be in coordinates. We need to expand this coordinates button, and we need to choose name NEZ code as a .csv. So name NEZ code, and it needs to have the .csv next to it. So you'll select that file type, and it might load for a second. Okay, and then you can hit save. Fantastic. Okay, so at this point, it's been saved, and we're ready to move forward. So once this file has been saved, we're going to want to navigate to where we saved it, because sometimes when we convert these files, and I'll show you in a second, sometimes when we convert these files, the very first row of data is empty because of the way that the total station saves it, and this will cause an error when you try to import it into Civil 3D. So navigate to where your converted .csv file is, and then you can double click on it, and you want to make sure that it opens in Excel. So once it's open in Excel, you're going to look at this, and I can see here, right, I have data in all of these rows going down, but I don't have any data in row 1. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to select row 1 by right-clicking on the entire row. Sorry, by left-clicking on the row number. Then I'm going to right-click and hit delete. That's all I need to do. Some files, the .raw files, will normally have an empty row when we convert the data. Other file types, like in .xyz, which is mostly what we'll be working with this semester, will not have an empty row. So you may or may not need to do this process. But if you get errors when importing to Civil 3D, you should definitely do this step. So now all I got to do is I need to do File, and I'm going to have to do Save As on this, and then I just want to save it exactly where it was before. It'll ask me if I want to overwrite it. I'm going to hit Yes, and that's it. Okay, now we can create a new Civil 3D project so that we can actually have this data visualized to us. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open Autodesk Civil 3D, and when you open it, you're going to want to open the Imperial version. There's really not much difference just besides the units. We are here in America, so we're going to use the Imperial version. So we're going to open, create a new document, I should say. So to do this, we're going to come over here in this kind of start menu. It should look like this. You'll hit this drop down next to new, and you'll hit browse templates. Now, the first file that we had you downloaded, the CONST340 Civil 3D template, it'll become very helpful to you as we go forward throughout these survey and technology assignments. So you'll want to use that. So navigate to where you downloaded that template, and then you will want to select it, right? I found it right here. Same thing as I talked about in the Topcon link video. If you don't see the template and know it should be here, just make sure the file extension is .dwt. This one, there's really only one option, so it should always show up. But you'll find that template and you'll hit open. Once you do that, it's going to create a new Civil 3D project for you. If you've used AutoCAD before, this will look very similar. Civil 3D is actually built on top of AutoCAD. And so a lot of this is going to look pretty familiar to you. Once we have this new Civil 3D project open, we just want to double check and make sure that it did create from the template. The easiest way to do that is you want to make sure that here on point groups that you can hit this plus and that point groups show up. If it was created, here I'll just create a new one not on that template. If it was created not using the template we provided, you won't see that plus next to the point groups. That means it was not created using the template we provided. You'll have to go back through the steps that I just went through and create it from the template we gave you. Let's do a quick overview of the Civil 3D user interface. I will preface this by saying that I am in no way an expert on Civil 3D. My knowledge of it is limited. However, I will provide a link in the assignment page where you can visit Autodesk website and read their documentation on the Civil 3D interface. What I'm going to show you today is not going to be a fully comprehensive dive into it. It'll just be what we'll end up using for this class and can hopefully help you a little bit as we move through this. So first, we're going to take a look up here. This is called the ribbon up here. This whole section is called the ribbon, and each one of these is a tab within the ribbon. I call it a tab at least. So throughout these videos, if you hear me say go to the output tab in the ribbon, you'd go over here. If I say go to the help tab in the ribbon, you'd go over here. So that's what this is called. It's the ribbon. Probably the most common tabs that we'll be in are the home, the insert, and the annotate tab. Modify will also be one that we'll be in as we start working with surfaces. When you select a particular object, other tabs will show up over here on the ribbon in blue, and you'll see that as we start moving forward. The next part that I'd like to talk about is called the tool space. The tool space is over here on the left-hand side of the screen. Within the tool space, there's a couple different tabs: the prospector tab, the settings tab, the survey tab, and the toolbox tab. We will pretty much spend all of our time in the prospector tab or in the settings tab. If you hear me throughout these videos say in the prospector, go to the point groups, that's where it's going to be. You'll find the prospector tab under the tool space over here. Another example would be go to the surfaces in prospector. The next part of the interface that's super important is actually one of the ways that we will interact with the interface is called this command line. The command line itself is housed down here at the bottom of Civil 3D, but you don't actually need to click on the command line to enter command. You can actually enter command just by typing while on the screen. For example, I can type in ZOOM and that'll enter the zoom command. You can come down here to the command line. If I start typing it in here, you'll see options will pop up and you can click this little help button next to it and it'll show you more of what that particular command does, and that can be helpful. So the command line is down here. If you are in a command, let's say like if I'm in the zoom command here and I suddenly say, hey, I no longer actually want to be zooming in on something, all I have to do is hit the escape button. Hitting the escape button will exit the command. It's basically like hitting a back button, more or less. Another important part of the interface that we'll need to become familiar with is down here under the command line. It's right over here. If you look at this little square, the square has a drop down next to it, and there's kind of on one corner of the square there's another square. This is called the object snap settings. The object snap settings basically say, well, here, let me actually draw something real quick. I'll draw a line real quick and then you'll be able to see how it works. Okay. So if I wanted to draw another line and I want it to connect to the end of this one, you see how kind of right there my cursor just snapped to the end of that line, that little green box showed up? That's called snapping. If I click on this box, you'll see that it no longer snaps. I just turned all of my object snapping off. And if I hit this drop down within the object snap box, there's different things that I can snap to. So right now I have endpoint turned on, which is why I snapped to the endpoint of this line. I can also tell that I want to be able to snap to the midpoint of this line. Midpoints are shown as a triangle in Civil 3D. So if I turn midpoint off, you'll see that it no longer wants to snap to the midpoint of the line. So these are a couple different things over here. In general, you want to have snap settings turned on only as much as necessary. You'll end up finding that if you have all of the options for the snapping turned on, as you start zooming in and you want to snap to a particular object, let's say two are really close to one another, right? This one's right here. Because you might want to snap to the end of this line and it could start to try to pull you over to this line. So we try to leave on as few as possible to get the job done and do it well. I normally just leave endpoint, midpoint, and definitely node on, and you can turn on and off the others as needed. If you want to turn object snap off, totally, you just click this button right here. It'll turn it on and off right there. So that's object snap settings. Right next to the snap settings, if you kind of skip over here, this is the annotation scale of the drawing. Once we actually import the points into Civil, I'll adjust the scale and you can see what it does. Right now it won't really do, you won't really see it make much of a difference, but that's where this is located. If I tell you to adjust the scale of your drawing, you're going to come over here and you can adjust the scale right there. We have been working this far in the Model tab, so there's a couple of different spaces that we can work in. One is called the Model tab. It's where you're doing your drafting. Another is called the Layout tab. Imagine this as a piece of paper itself. So this Layout tab is sized basically as an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper currently. You can change the settings, but right now it's an 8.5 by 11. This is called a viewport, this little box right here. Imagine a viewport as a window. This window looks into our model space. So if you see I'm zooming in and out right now, and I'm using my scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out, I'm not actually zooming in or out on the model. I'm just zooming in and out on this piece of paper. Right now I'm in paper view is what it's called. If I double click on this viewport, I enter what's called model view, and I'm actually zooming in and out on the model now. I can make adjustments or changes to the model. If I come and I double click on the paper over here, I get back into paper view. I can also change this by coming down here. We're kind of near where the object snap settings was. You see this paper button? If I click it, it'll go to model. And you'll see it now says model down here, and if I click it again it goes to paper. So there's a couple of things we can do there. One of the last things that we'll talk about is how we could resize the viewport. Resizing the viewport can be handy based on what you want to actually show up on this piece of this paper. This layout is actually what's going to end up being printed. So to resize the viewport, I just select it by hovering over the edge of the viewport, this line, and you'll see it kind of highlights. If I click it, you'll see that these drag points will show up. And all I have to do is click on the point once, and then I can drag. Once I click on the point, it enters an editing mode where I can adjust where the edge of this viewport will be. So that's it right there. For the interface. Like I said, if you want to dive deeper into this, hop on YouTube, search some videos for it. This is really just the very, very basics. Let's import those points into Civil 3D that we used originally. First, I'm going to clean up this model. If you've been playing around in yours, let's clean it up. Something you can do to select in Civil 3D is if you hover your mouse over an empty space, if it's not on top of an object, you can right click and you can drag. If it shows up as a green square, it means that any part of the object that it touches, if it touches any part of the object, it'll select the entire object. If I do the same thing, but I drag from, and I see the blue square. So dragging from the right to the left from the square produces a green box. Dragging from the left to the right produces the blue box. Anything a blue box touches, it must be inside the blue box completely in order to select. If I press and hold down my cursor, I can do a lasso select. Same concept, going from the right to the left. Produces a green lasso. Going from the left to the right produces the blue lasso. So in this case, I'm just going to take all this and I'm going to delete it. I'm just going to hit the delete key on my keyboard to clean this up. Now let's import the points that we're going to be using. So for this, we're going to go to the Insert tab up on the ribbon, and I want to do Points from File in this import area. So Insert Points from File. The Import Points pop-up will show. And in order to do this, I'm going to hit this green plus mark right here, and I'm going to navigate to that .csv file we saved when we exported from Topcon link and then edited it. So here we go. I've got it selected right here. Once again, if your file is not showing up, make sure your files of type is either set to be all files or the specific file that you're looking for. Okay. Now something that's happening here, and I'm glad this happened, this little X is showing up because I actually still have it open in Excel. You cannot import the file if it's open in Excel still. And it asked if I want to save it again. I'm just going to save it again here. So I'll save that, and then I'll close it, and then I might have to hit that plus again. So then we'll do that, and we'll hit open. And you see this check mark shows, it means that it was able to read the file and everything worked out. So now once we do that, we need to specify the point format of the file. When the total station records the points, it records it in a specific order. The data is recorded in order so that the software can read it. We have to tell it how it was recorded. In this case, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, we have it recorded as PNEZD, comma, delimited. This means that the data was recorded in the order of point number, northing, easting, Z, and then D for description. If you remember on Topcon link, we exported it or saved it as point NEZ code. Code is the same thing as description. So PNEZD is what we want to import it as. So you'll just select that and then just review and make sure that it looks correct in this preview. Not all of your points that you've taken will show up in this preview box, so don't worry if you only see a limited number of them. It's just a preview. You don't really have to check anything else here, just hit OK. So we've imported the points, but we can't necessarily see them. This is for a couple reasons. The points are tied to a geographic grid. Civil 3D works on a grid. Imagine graph paper. It's pretty much the same thing. Right now we're looking at a different section of the graph paper than where the points are. So in order to do that, there's a couple of things we can do. The easiest is to double click the scroll wheel on your mouse and it will zoom and it'll center the entire the file on your screen so you can see it. Another thing that you can do if you don't have a mouse, which I highly recommend you do get one, you can type in the command ZOOM, hit enter, and then type E, and that means it'll zoom to extent, and then the same thing will happen there. Another thing that you can do here is you can, on this view cube, you can hit this top button, and it'll center you as well on that. So there's a couple different options there to do that. Navigating within Civil 3D, if you press and hold your scroll wheel, you can pan. If you move your scroll wheel in and out, it'll zoom. And those are a couple navigations things. If you do not have a mouse with you, you can come over here to the view cube, and if you hold down shift and press W, it pulls up a navigation wheel, and you can use this navigation wheel if you hover over the command that you want to use and then you click on it while moving, that's what it'll do. So that's something you can do if you're working just off a trackpad there. To make that disappear, hit shift W again. Now that we have the points imported, we want to be able to print them to a PDF so that we can share this with others. Not everyone's going to have Civil 3D, and sharing it as a PDF or being able to print it is going to be the best way to show other individuals what we've been able to gather and put into Civil 3D. So the first thing that we're going to do for this is we're going to go back to the Layout tab. Remember I said the layout is basically the piece of paper that is being printed. The first thing that we want to do here, if you have not already, is resize the viewport. Remember to do that, you're just going to click on the little squares at the corner of the viewport. This allows you to drag it. So you'd select the viewport by hovering over it, and then you click the squares. So we want to make that viewport as large as possible because this is a relatively small sheet of paper, and we want to be able to show as much information as possible and make it as big as we can so it's easy to read. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create a simple title block. If you've ever seen civil drawings or even regular construction drawings, there's a title block that says what's going on in this drawing. What are we showing you exactly? And in this case, we're actually just going to do something really simple. We're just going to draw a rectangle in the bottom corner of this paper. So I'm just going to zoom in over here, and some of these commands that I've been using here, if I press and hold the scroll wheel of my mouse, it allows me to pan, it allows me to drag around the model, or in this case the paper. And that's one thing I've been doing to get over here, and then I'm using the scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out. So we need to draw a simple rectangle, so the command for that is REC for rectangle. And I have my object snap on, so you see it wants to snap to the corner of this viewport. And I'm just going to make a rectangle about this big. It doesn't really matter how big you make it. The next thing that I want to do is I want to add text inside of this rectangle. And this text will have my name, and we're going to include the project name here. The command for this is mtext, so it's mtext. Alternatively, if you don't do the command, you can come up here to the annotate tab in the ribbon, and you can click on this multi-line text button. If I do that, I'm actually just going to make the text, the multi-line text, it's basically a text box. I'm going to let it snap to that corner, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag till it comes to this corner right here. And on the first line, I'm just going to enter my name, and I'm going to make it capitalized, and then I'm going to hit enter. Because this is multi-line, instead of finishing the command, it's going to do another line of text, and we're just going to call this intro to Civil 3D. And then to exit editing the text, you can either hit this close text editor button, or you can double click outside of that multi-line text box. To change this, if you want to edit the text after you've already worked on it, you can select the text like this, and you can either do the command mtedit, and you can enter, and it opens that, the editing dialog there, or you can hover over it, and while it's highlighted, if you just double click on the text, it'll do the same thing. In this case, let's say I want to make the text a little bit smaller or a little bit larger. The way that I can do that is first I'm going to select everything in the text box. And intuitively, Civil 3D, once you select text, it brings you to the text editor tab in the ribbon. This is one of those tabs that shows up when you're doing something text specific. So the way that I would change the size is I would come over here to style, and you see this number that says 0.2000. This is actually the text height. So if I change this to 0.15, you notice that the text height gets a little bit smaller. If I were to change it to 0.30, you notice it gets a little bit bigger. In this case, I really liked it at 0.20, so we're just going to leave it there. And I'm going to double click outside the text box to close it. And I kind of want to bring this into the corner a little bit more. So if you see these little arrows right here, these are grips that you can drag to resize that text box. So once you click on the grip, you're then changing the text box size, bring it to where you want it, and then click again and it stops. And this grip over here changes the location of the text. So I want to bring it over here like this. Oops. See, that was an instance where the snap settings, it tried to snap me to the edge of that box, and I did not like that. And then I also want to make this box a little bit smaller. So it's the same process for the box. All I have to do is select the rectangle, and then if I click on this center one right here, it'll allow me to bring that down, and I can bring this one in. Fantastic. If I zoom out, that looks great. I now have a small little title block that will help me identify what this is that we're looking at here. The last thing that we want to do is we want to scale the data inside the viewport to fit. Now remember, the viewport is a window into the model. So we're not necessarily looking at the same thing that the model is all the time. The model could be large, and I could have something in the model over here. Maybe I have another drawing over here on the model, and I only really want to see this part of the model right here. So something I'm going to do, because we only have this data in the model, is I've double clicked to enter my model view inside this layout tab. Alternatively, you can come down here and click that. And this is the scale right here, the scale of the viewport. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit scale to fit, and I'm going to click outside the viewport. And don't worry if all these points look huge right now. If you come and click on model and you come back to layout, they get small and they resize and look appropriate. So that's one way that we can scale that viewport to fit. Alternatively, if we had a custom scale in mind, let's say that I wanted to do 1 inch equals 150 feet, I could do that there. Because I'm not going to be scaling off of this drawing, I'm okay if we just scale it to fit. And then I'm just going to go model, then layout, just to make sure it kind of resizes and goes back to where we want it. So we are now prepared and ready to print after we save our project. Let's save the project. We've got it to this point. Printing will be easier if we save it first. So I'm going to take the project and hit this save button up here in the upper left hand corner. Alternatively, you can use the command QSAVE. And if it's the first time you're saving the project, that command will open the Save As dialog. If it's not the first time, it'll just save it to where it was previously saved. So let's save it to the file folders that we set up. And I'm going to name this one intro. Well, first, it's going to be the first initial of your first name, then your full last name, and then it's going to be underscore intro to Topcon link and civil 3D. So that's what you want to save it as. You hit save. Okay. Now we're actually going to print this, also known as plotting. You'll most likely hear me continue to refer to it as plotting in the future. So to plot, we come up here and we hit this little button that looks like a printer. Alternatively, you can use the command plot, P-L-O-T. Type that into your command bar. Here it's asking if we want to plot only this layout or if we want to plot all the layouts that are open and combine them into a file. I only want to plot this layout, so I'm going to plot to a single sheet. Here I need to select the printer. I'm going to choose Microsoft Print to PDF. This is something that everybody should have. Paper size letter is great. Do not click plot to file. This will make it so it doesn't print as a PDF. Everything else here looks good. Landscape orientation, the scale looks good as it is. And I'm going to hit preview. Now here we can see this paper itself. It fits within the paper. It looks good here. If your plot preview looks like this, you're good to go. If for some reason it's a little bit off, like let's say for some reason you could only see one section. I've had the plot preview come out before where it literally looks like this on the paper. It's just this section. Then you'll want to check your scale settings. Oftentimes, if you just go through the plot command again and leave the settings as default, it should print okay. So here I'm just going to hit this print button. It'll open. It'll ask me where I want to save the file as a PDF. I want to save it to my assignments. And we're going to do the same thing. First initial, last name, underscore, intro to Topcon link, and civil 3D. And then this one I want plot. This is for us as we grade it. Put plot in capital letters afterwards. So once you do that, you hit save. It's going to send it. And then you'll want to open it up and make sure that it plotted correctly and looks good, even though that preview showed it looking pretty good. So let's open it up. And there we go. This appears to have plotted well, even though it is rotated incorrectly. That's all right. It plotted and looks great. So there you go.